Traditional data warehousing expertise tells us that calculations should be performed during our ETL or ELT as close to our data sources as possible in order to relieve pressure on our semantic layer and our visualization tools. In today's video, we're going to explore where Power BI might challenge some of that thinking. Come along as we explore these options and best practices. Welcome back to my video blog where I discuss Azure and data concepts. Thank you to all of you for your support and engagements, as this channel has now eclipsed 20,000 views and we're going strong. Keep liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing these videos. Today, I welcome back my colleague, and we're going to look at ways Power BI may be a better choice than traditional ETL for your channels for building calculations and support of all of those business intelligence needs for your business.
Hey, Chris, welcome back. And, thanks again for joining me today. Some great momentum from the last two videos we made around the golden measures and some of the great performance that we can get and how we can optimize our performance with Power BI and Synapse. So last time when we spoke, you kind of threw a little challenge at me, and you said, well, I think that there's a case to be made around putting some of our calculations and some of that type of stuff inside of Power BI, and as I think a lot of the data warehousing world is aware, and for those who aren't, it's generally best practice that we want to put any of our calculations, any of the operations as part of our ETL, ELT as close to our data sources as possible. And that's really because we have some constraints around compute. When we, as we talked about, when we load all of this data into Power BI, we're doing all this compression. We're basically jamming a bunch of stuff. I mean, I think we get up to like 80% compression with Power BI of our data, and then we jam it all into memory. And so if we're doing these calculations in memory, it can really put a strain on it and kind of slow things down. So let's talk about that a little bit, and let's understand sort of where we want to go with that.
Yeah. So first off, let me introduce myself. Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Chalmers. I'm a Microsoft employee who talks to customers about Power BI. And I thought the force was with me. I thought I was going to stick it to Chris on this. I thought I was going to find the golden feature, or maybe gold's getting a little overused, the platinum feature or the iridium feature where you'd say, wow, I'm done with SQL. I'm computing in Power BI and that's it. So when I studied up for this, I didn't find the platinum feature, but I did find some interesting rationale, some interesting use cases, and I'll demonstrate some of those to you, Chris, to give a sense about why we feel that Power BI is the appropriate place for this type of compute. But first, let me just share my screen and wave the white flag right away, because this is a blog post from a Microsoft PM, Matthew Roche. Chris, can you see my screen there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so straight from the horse's mouth, right? Roche's maxim of data transformation. Data should be transformed as far upstream possible and as far downstream as necessary. So, yeah, we're basically in agreement that there's certainly nothing wrong. There are benefits to computing the measures further upstream in the warehouse. I'm not going to get into a warehouse, conversation with like the 60 parallel nodes and all that. But in summary, there's a compelling argument to put your measure computation in there. That being said, we're going to see some other features of Power BI that make a lot of sense in terms of enabling the business users to understand the measures and enabling business users, especially Excel users, to work with the measures, where hopefully you'll say, yeah, I do want the breadth and depth of my measure library in the Power BI layer.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes sense, right? I think you if we have that baseline of we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to say that you shouldn't put your data as close as possible. However, we are saying that there are certain situations where you may need to, or you may want to, or it may be advantageous to, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, cool. So why don't we jump in? Let's talk about, where it just might not make sense to have it as part of our ETL.
Right. So, in our first two videos, we really talked about enterprise architecture and enterprise rigor around the measure development process. We had some fun with scary spreadsheet horror stories and that sort of thing. But in this discussion, I want to lean into self-service BI, right? Because that really is a thing where the business, we sometimes talk about report 11. I talked to enterprise IT, you delivered on your first 10 reports. What happened to the 11th request? Where did that user go? How did they accomplish what they needed? Did they accomplish what they need? So, self-service BI is here to stay, and I'm hardly the first person to say that. One of the reasons Power BI is a great place for, ad hoc measure extension in terms of building upon existing measures in the warehouse or whole sheets, recalculation is our ability to generate insights. So that's a very strong part of the platform. And you're going to see insights generated both desktop side, so without a cloud connection, what we can do on the desktop, and then cloud side. And the whole point of this is, and I'll just show you really quick what I'm talking about. So this is a line graph, like you haven't seen a line graph here. Okay, so one of the right mouse behaviors is analyze. And so a popular analysis here is explain the increase. And so what's going to happen is Power BI is going to run some various models and analyses. And I'm not exactly sure what each and every one of these models and analyses is, but I'm given
That's what
a
we have
choice.
documentation for.
Reading the documentation, that's my go-to.
Oh yeah,
So
well that's your state. I mean, and really for the viewers who are curious about this, I mean, they can go and find that, right? We don't need to fully explain, what all that is. They can, if they're really curious. I mean, for me, it's just I want to point and click and see what that analysis is, really.
yeah, and as a statistician, I can't tell you how many times it was hammered into my mind. Correlation is not causality, right? But that kind of makes my point about ad hoc exploration of data sets, right? So let's start with finding something interesting and asking, is this correlation or is this causal? And so what Power BI has done is, based off that one data point or that one graph, it's generated a bunch of different insights for me. And then there's different ways of visualizing those insights. So this particular insight is talking about or helping me identify which products in the mix were most responsible for the increase in sales, for the line going up and to the right. And absent this technology, I would be, staring at a table
Right.
or, applying, conditional highlighting or grubbing around, right? But I can see it right here and it's beautifully depicted. So, one or two mouse clicks later, I can basically see that this product here and that product there were the major contributors to the increase in sales. So I'll just go ahead and add that to the page. I might want to format it a little differently, but this is, so this is the desk side example of AI Insight. And then the cloud side example of that would be.
Well, actually, 1 second before you go over that. One thing I do find interesting about that, and even better than the waterfall chart would be that scatter plot visual. And the waterfall chart is great, but the reality is, with the size of those lines, you can't really tell what the impact was. Whereas with the scatter plot, you've got the ability to really see what those outliers are, right? That made that impact. And I think that's an important thing to note when you talk about, causation versus correlation, because, your sales are going up, but if, let's just say it was a one-time product sale because it was something that you had, right? And you blew them out. You no longer have them. You're no longer going to recognize the revenue from that because it's all gone, right? And so, you're most likely going to then regress back to the mean, and you're not going to be able to rely on that type of performance going forward.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. And we have even more stuff here to show. I probably should have prepared it for this video, but we've announced recently, analysis of outliers, and in terms of Microsoft automating the automating the creation of visuals that show new insight, as well as enabling the the ad hoc analysis. Let me go ahead and rerun the insight analysis, and we'll take a look at the scatter version. Right, same data, but Chris, to your point, it's much more stark. And here I'm going to use Power BI's focus mode so you can really see it. Right now, it's really clear. Gosh, this data set has a couple of outliers that are really driving the increase. And here's a beautiful thing, right? As you said, I can click on this point and exclude it from the analysis and rerun it here. So, maybe I have a good business reason, right, why I want to exclude these outliers. In fact, I think was it Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book strictly on outliers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Add that to the things that I need to go read.
Good book too.
Yeah. So anyway, the point of what we're doing here is after we've loaded the data from the warehouse, after we've loaded in all the measures that were pre-calculated through the ETL process, what have you, we're still doing ad hoc analysis and exploration, and this is still going to prompt us to seek new insight, and that may in fact require writing new measures. I just want to go ahead.
No, I love the fact that we could see as you were excluding things, it changed the model, right? It changed your graph, it changed the trajectory, if you will, and gave you the ability to do that analysis by excluding those outliers. I love that it has that flexibility.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I mentioned how this ran desktop side. We also have cloud side functionality, right? And with the acres of compute that can be thrown at it, anything's possible. So sure. The particular feature here is called View Insights, and actually anyone who's ever uploaded their Power BI data set into the cloud was prompted to view insights. And again, going through a bunch of different models, correlation may not be causality, but here's a shopping cart full of, and right here's the outliers stuff that I was talking about. Microsoft's done a lot of work in that area. Here's more insights, and the default behavior here is pin it, right? So pin the visual to a dashboard or work with it. But my point is, for the self-service analyst, they may want to in fact actually start doing ad hoc measure editing. And I will not take us through DAX and intro Power BI measures. That is amply covered in the YouTube sphere. But I do want to show something that I found kind of cool, called the Whatif analysis. So here I'm going to click on a new parameter, and this is our Whatif analysis. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a new measure in the model and give me a visual to control the measure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have discount percent, and discount percent is going to be a fixed decimal, minimum of 0, maximum of 1, increment by 0.01, have a default of 0.05, and then add a slicer to the page. So what I've done now is I've got the slicer on the page, right, which is going to let me reset the value of the measure, in real time as an analyst. And then I also now have in the model here in the upper right, I've got this new measure, discount percentage value. So let me go here into, say, sales, which is, a simple enough measure. And let me see if I can zoom in a little bit for you here. Sales is simply sum of revenue, and I'm just going to, and again, I know this is ad hoc, but let's just go with it, right? So I'll just say it is sum. I love autocomplete. Sales revenue times our new measure, which is discount percent value. Right, so now I've added a measure to the model, right? And sure, maybe you could have put discounting in the warehouse, maybe not, but you couldn't have put ad hoc discounting into the warehouse, right? So now, and I'll just drag this on here onto a table so we can take a look at this measure, right? And so now, and let me just expand this so we can, spin the wheel and watch our profitability plummet as we slide the discount slider. So you can see the dynamic recalculation here, right? That type of exploration, that type of expansion of the measure base, Power BI really excels at this. And for the people that are prone to performing these kinds of calculations, this is the place. So that's my argument why this is one of my arguments why this is the layer for the golden measure.
Sure, because in years past, in order to do that kind of analysis, you'd have to extract all the data, pull it into Excel, add in those percentages, build your table based around that. You still didn't have any of the dynamic nature of it all. You'd have to kind of build it all out manually, right? And then, that just creates a whole bunch of work. And otherwise, you have to be an oracle and understand what all of your users are going to ask all of the time and put those measures, build those calculations into the ETL without having this sort of dynamic capability to build that in.
Right, and we're going to get to Excel in a second. I did kind of want to geek out just a little bit, so let me just toss the slider to the side here. Additionally, you can insert more advanced measure calculations using either the Python programming language or the R language. So here, I've clicked on the Python visual, and obviously you're getting a prompt, right? So Python's a very powerful language that does a lot of interesting things, right? So, you were warned here. But the point is, you can now start taking fields from your model, right? You can start taking the stuff and putting it into Python, and then Python can calculate it and render it. And we do this for Python. We also do this for R. I mentioned a statistical background. R will never die. Who's with me? Apparently nobody. Anyway, so R or Python. So again, the idea is this is the ad hoc canvas for advanced calculation and exploration that is well served by having the entirety of the organization's models, security boundaries applying, obviously, but because all of the measures are at my disposal through Power BI models, it's the best place to start building this. And with that, I was going to not cast shade on Excel, but explain, well, everyone says, I thought Excel did that.
Well, yeah, and so I mean, Excel has some, I guess, some capability there. But before we jump into that, I mean, I think what's important to realize is that yes, in certain database systems, right, SQL in the last several revisions has released the capability to do more machine learning functions, if you will, by using R and Python in the varying versions, and everything is different. Each version has its own capabilities and stuff. So you've got some of that capability built into the database. But again, you don't know what your users are going to ask for on the fly, and especially in a self-service model, A, and then B, you've got a statistics background. I don't, right? So I couldn't write a lick of R or Python code without doing a significant amount of uplift and learning and skilling and things like that. And so, I think that what really helps differentiate Power BI from some of the more traditional visualization tools is that you have that capability to be able to add that in as part of what you're offering to those end consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And in all fair, excuse me, in all fairness, Chris, I had a pretty humbling desktop compute experience this week. It was really small stuff. It was a million row table, right? Super, super easy for Power BI to handle. Joining on another million row table, and I was joining on GUID, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of integers neatly sorted, I I was joining on 24 character text columns, and my
Really
end
hard to
result.
compress for the people who are wondering at home.
Yeah. So the point is, it took 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right? I'd click go, and it's like 5 minutes. Oh, get a cup of coffee. It's like
Right.
an hour. Oh, get a meal. It's like 2 hours. It's like, should I kill this?
Yeah.
And what it taught me is, A, it's possible to write non-performant code, but B, there are some calculations. So let's assuming that was a good idea. Obviously, it was a terrible idea, but let's assume that was a good idea. Maybe you do push that calculation someplace where you can spike CPU. And as to your point, the ability of, SQL in the cloud to call out to, cloud scale ML, cloud scale Python, cloud scale R, or whatever, there could be very good reasons where, yeah, sure, I could do it in the desktop, but I want to close the lid on my laptop one of these days, so I will choose not to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But
yeah,
let's go. Yeah, but let's go rough up Excel. And so what I mean by that is, right, so every BI tool exports to Excel, and Excel is the gold standard. Sorry, I couldn't resist, for ad hoc calculation. But there are some things that Power BI can do that Excel cannot. And Microsoft's very transparent about it, right? This is actually a piece of Power BI documentation giving Excel users, 6 reasons why. And we can paste the link in the comments. I'm not going to drain this web page for you, but 2 important things. The first one is tables larger than 1 million rows, right? So as we know, Excel only supports a 1 million row sheet. And Power BI, even on the desktop, assuming you're not doing something crazy, is comfortable with millions, perhaps tens of millions of rows. And then the second thing is pulling multiple tables together, right? So Power BI is very much data model aware. DAX is data model aware. So you look at what an Excel user would go through with VLOOKUP compared to what can be done with the DAX language. And the ability to, set this stuff up in Power Query and what have you. So even though you're comfortable with Excel, there are certainly some scenarios where Power BI is the better choice. And we actually train people on that. We've recently released a course called Modern Analyst in a Day that is focused on the Excel user, and it highlights specific scenarios that are difficult in Excel and easy in Power BI. So yeah, absolutely. Power BI has earned its rightful place in ad hoc calculation and measure development, even in a world that's awash with Excel. And frankly, as an Excel user as well, I'd say rightfully so.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think back of the days when, maybe Power BI was immature, or you only had the data in Excel, and you had that analyze button in Excel where it would kind of just use like a standard algorithm, for straight line analysis and things like that. And I mean, some of that stuff is just it's just too immature with the type of data that we're trying to analyze. And so having the advanced capabilities in Power BI, I certainly think there are far more features and far more algorithms available if you're using Power BI than there would be in Excel as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you could even argue it's extensible with some of the stuff we just showed.
Sure. Okay. Awesome.
I'd like to actually go in a slightly different direction, which is natural language Q&A, user interaction, and it's not really data dictionary. It's more usability. But let me just show you what I mean here. So
Okay.
I'm going to put a natural language Q&A interface on top of this model, so people can type in. I don't know if they can talk or not. I think they can. I have to look that up. But I'm just going to hit the Q&A visual, put that in here, and automatically Microsoft AI is going to scan over here. It's going to scan my model, identify all the rows and columns, what have you, and start suggesting questions I can ask. And I'm just going to ask a simple question here, right? So sales by zip.
Yeah, and as this renders, I think the important thing to note about this, where it pertains to the discussion around our ETL and building these measures and stuff, is that there's certainly going to be situations where you may not even know what type of measure you need to build. And so what Power BI gives you is the capability to now take this data and run its own analysis to say, well, where might we need to drill in deeper, or what haven't we thought of? And I think that's where these features coming in really, really handy. And certainly it's never anything you could build as part of your ETL, because you just don't know what questions are going to be asked.
Exactly. And let me drill into this a little bit further, right? Because obviously Microsoft's a powerhouse in natural language Q&A, but we also have a great track record in search engine optimization. And let me explain why this is also a search engine problem. So I typed in sales by zip and I got what I wanted. I saw suggested questions, right? But really, that's pretty easy stuff. It's fishing in a barrel, or whatever the metaphor is. So here I'm going to type in sales by postal code, right? Which is a very natural behavior for a Canadian or what have you. And you're going to see I'm getting misses and problems here, right? So it's underlined the words that it doesn't recognize in red, right? So what do we do about that? And so that's where the additional features of Power BI make it helpful and appropriate. And we've got this entire guide to fueling the Q&A engine here. So one of the big ones is reviewing questions. And I don't have any questions in the model yet, but like in a search engine optimization, people look at the logs of what did people ask for, what got hits, and what came up dry, right? So if people come to your search engine, type in a term and don't get a result, that's a very important thing to know, right? Because they're not going to come back if they can't get what they want. So, search engine optimization looks very hard at that, right? So the ability for us to review the questions, to teach the Q&A, and then we also make it super easy to generate the synonyms, right? So here we are looking at the synonyms for zip, and here again there's a bunch of suggested terms, and this is having to do with energy, right? Vigor, spunk, vitality. No, but I might add, postal code. Right. And maybe I'll add, zip code. And again, this is super easy, from the Power BI perspective. And so now I'm going to come in here and ask for sales by postal code, and I'm going to have a happy result. So sales by, and you see there, it recognized it. It recognizes the synonyms, it uses it, right? So this is my argument for Power BI adding value to your measures layer, to your data model layer, right? Being able to fill and build all of this stuff out, right? I mean, data dictionaries are great, and Azure Purview has a bunch of security stuff and all that, but being able to, right? Because Power BI is the last mile between IT and data and the end user, right? This is what we're going to present to the end user. So I would submit that this is the correct place to put all of this stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah. No. And so, I mean, when we think about this in totality, right, we're going to need to calculate some stuff as part of the ETL, especially the stuff that's going to take a ton of compute, right? So you've got really, really really, really beefy calculations that are going to take a while. They're going to take a lot of resources. They're going to crunch on that CPU, and they're really going to stretch the system if we use Power BI for that. Because the other thing that we got to keep in mind, I referenced it earlier, but part of, when we talked about compressing that GUID, you say GUID, I say GUID, whatever, right? But when we compress down that GUID, that's just a microcosm of all of the data that's included in part of that data set. And so when you run through the Power Query every time, and then you go and build those measures as part of actually finishing up what's going to be taking place in your visualizations, what's happening in your measures, that all gets added into the amount of time it takes to refresh your data. So if you are front loading those calculations as part of the development of the ETL process, now you're taking pressure off of what is happening when you're doing that compression, and you're speeding up the ability for your front end to do that refresh, right? And so that's kind of a baseline. And then we shift to, well, we don't know what users are going to ask of our data, right? And we don't know that our users are going to know what to ask of our data, right? And so, it's all these leading tools to be able to help with that process. Sorry, you're going to say something?
No, I was merely agreeing. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think, we've got a pretty good line of delineation there between when we want to include those calculations as part of our ETL, and when we want to instead give our users the ability to build those measures, build our own measures where it may be something that you can't even build into the ETL like you used with the Whatif analysis, right? You can't build, well, you could, but it'd be silly to build out a table guessing all of the percentage discounts that somebody wants to look at to see what the comparison may be. And I mean, I can remember
like something I would do.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that, because I can remember, back in my ERP days when I would be working and pulling data out of our ERP, there were some canned fields, in one of the ERPs that we used, where it showed that as part of, what would it be with a 10% discount, what would it be with a 20% discount, and those kinds of things, right? It was actually a field in the table, that laid underneath the ERP to be able to show it on the screen for users. But I mean, they were round numbers. They were very, very straightforward. And, each industry is going to have their own measures by which they need to understand what those discounts look like. So I think we've accomplished what we wanted to do for this video, is to make that very clear around where the measures or the calculations should be. So do we have anything else that we should cover?
We do.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Wait, there's more?
But wait, there's more. So I wanted to close with a ray of hope in terms of where measure writing and calculation is going. And this is part of an overarching meta argument. So at Microsoft Build, the Power BI team had an announcement, and it wasn't exclusively Power BI. Power Apps also shared this announcement, and that is what we call AI-powered development, which is basically natural language to measures. And so here's a GIF running that shows this, and here in the upper right corner, you can see that someone is typing in a natural language statement. They're typing in rolling 10-day average of whatever the value is. And
oh man, that would save so much time.
Yeah, and you look at the DAX, and that one's way up there. I had to double check it to see if it was legit. I'm like, that thing wrote a pretty good measure, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
In terms of what this implies for the ability to in terms of making the argument for Power BI as the correct technology for the location of golden measures, if and when, we pull this off, I think that would be a much stronger case saying, yeah, I want my measures in Power BI. I want to understand its capabilities, and I want to make those capabilities more widely available.
Do we have a timing on that?
We do. You'd think I'd have it ready for this video. When we announced it, I don't believe we put a timeline. We do have a public-facing roadmap for all the Power Platform products, including Power BI. So
we can put that in the notes.
Yeah, we can put that in the notes.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So that's awesome. I'm super excited to start playing with that as well.
Yeah.
So I think from the Power BI perspective, we've done some really good stuff, and we've helped the viewers here get a better understanding of the perspective that Microsoft has when delivering these tools, and some recommendations around architectures and recommendations around tooling and things like that. So I think I'm going to make you do some extra homework. And I want to kind of circle back to the Synapse discussion a little more heavy, right? All of this kind of somewhat talks around Synapse and where where Synapse and Power BI play better together. When we start talking about theories and stuff like that. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to have you come back in maybe a month or two, where we can talk about some of the optimization pieces that we would see from Synapse. Obviously Synapse is an ever-changing, ever-growing, ever-improving service, and really like to have you come back and kind of go deeper on why we get enhanced performance with Synapse over some of the other perhaps leading cloud data warehouse vendors. Is that something you're interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our first video, which is actually a month or two old at this point,
sure.
We talked about some of the preview items like automatic aggregations, like the Power BI accelerator for Synapse, right? So, as those mature, as we have more customer feedback, maybe even some demos of these, and as new integrations, come into public preview, I very much anticipate that the better together story between Power BI and Azure Synapse will get better. And why wouldn't it, right? That's been true with the Microsoft Office platform and every other technology we make. That's the fundamental Microsoft value proposition is integrated versus best of breed. And
sure.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing some stuff there. So thank you. I'd love to do that.
Great. Okay, great. I'm looking forward to it. Well, for now, I think this wraps us up. We're going to turn over to a new year coming up soon, and in the video land where this all gets archived, it could be 2023 by the time you see this video, but and everything will be totally different. But thanks again for the time. This has been a great series so far. I'm really enjoying working together on it, and I hope you have a great holiday season.
Thanks, you too, Chris.
All right, thanks, Chris. All right, take care.